Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be a fun one. Is America declining like ancient Rome? This has been a fun conversation for a little bit of time, probably the last 15, 20 years. More or less trying to parallel things that occurred in the late Roman Empire to the likes of America. And I'm not sure, but I'm not going to make any assumptions or thoughts until we listen and react to this video. Um, Toldinstone, thank you for being here. Let's see what we got in store, and then we'll put our analysis to the test. Great underrated channel right here, for sure.
Of all the myths and misconceptions about the Romans that circulate on the internet, one is more durable than all the others. The idea that modern America is destined to decline and fall like ancient Rome. There are many variations on the premise, with some commentators focusing on an increasingly unsettled international landscape and others taking aim at domestic division. But every crisis seems to raise visions of the Pax Americana going down in flames and barbarians hammering at the gates. These anxieties are rooted in America's unique trajectory. The United States emerged from the Second World War as the wealthiest and most powerful nation in history, especially after the
Even really before that, ever since the Industrial Revolution, where American manufacturing took a step. I mean, obviously the British Empire was the sole superpower, I think, for the longest time. And there's military superpowers before Britain and after Britain. But as like a global sphere of influence, it was Britain in the 17th, 16th, or sorry, for like the 18th, 19th, and 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, it was Britain, by far and large. Like they had India, they had great, parts of Africa, parts of North America, Great Britain, the Isles, um, Australia. They had the sun never set, so they had their hands in pretty much every part of the world, which allowed them to negotiate trade deals, have really a strong economy. They for a good part of the 17th, 18th, 19th century, well, declined in the 19th century. They exercised within the slave trade. But whenever the Industrial Revolution comes around, that's when things kind of like turn on its head and give a little bit more playing field to a lot of the Western civilizations. Europe, as well as the United States. And that's when the United States, with their manufacturing, their resources, the population, really starts to explode. And after the Great Depression, World War II, militarism, and then manufacturing and exports, rationing, and so many different things at once allowed for America to not get. And obviously, a big part of it is their economy was not devastated as much as the rest of the world was. Like you think of the people that were high and mighty during 1938 or 37 or somewhere in that sphere right before the war started. You're looking at Germany, you're looking at France, United Kingdom, Japan. Those countries were decimated from the war effort, whether it be people or bombing campaigns, which hurt their economy. And it did not. We did not get bombed, the United States. So looking for parallels there to kind of like see how the United States became the top dog. But here we are.
The collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a widespread sense that American supremacy would last. Then, the world seemed to change. First, 9/11 and the unwinnable War on Terror. After that, the vicious system shock of the Great Recession. More recently, the rise of China, dysfunctional domestic politics, and tensions in Europe have prompted
Russia.
pundits to proclaim an era of decadence. When searching for analogies to explain America's decline, commentators across the political spectrum have turned to Rome. This was probably inevitable. For Americans, as for the rest of the West, Rome is the quintessential empire, and the fall of Rome is the most familiar saga of imperial collapse. Americans also have a sense that Rome is in their political DNA.
It kind of is. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, we even build our buildings like the Romans. Federal building. There's definitely differences within their time, but let me know if you disagree. But I mean, if you look at like if who would be the Roman Empire of today, it's the United States.
The Constitution, after all, represents an attempt to create a new and perfected Roman Republic. Anxieties about Roman-style decline have been present since the beginning. The Founding Fathers knew how the Roman Republic had ended and read Cicero and Polybius obsessively for clues about how to avoid its fate. Americans, in short, are conditioned to see the...
It's so funny. Every time I hear the word or hear the name Cicero, because Cicero coddled Alexander. Sorry, I said Alexander. Coddled, from what I'm from what I've read and watched before, coddled Octavian into, but maybe Cicero ultimately died under the Second Triumvirate, but he actually coddled his way into creating the Second Triumvirate. Whenever Octavian really didn't have an inside guy. So Cicero is an interesting character in regard. Polybius, not too well read on him. But Cicero is also a really good moderate at the same time.
Roman Empire as both an ancestor and an analog. There are superficial points of correlation between the later Roman Empire and modern America. Each was the greatest power of its time. Each had been, at least relative to other states, more powerful in the past. Each had a strong legal system and a society that left room for social advancement.
I wouldn't be careful with these words. Each had. We still have a pretty strong legal system.
Despite institutionalized violence and inequality at every level, each professed to be guided by Christian principles. Beyond that
after paganism, yes,
basic level, the similarities end. Rome was an absolute monarchy.
And this picture on the left is the Eastern Roman Empire. But if we want to keep these two things the same, we can.
The similarities end. Rome was an absolute monarchy founded on subsistence agriculture. America is a democratic republic with a sophisticated capitalist economy. The tenor of Roman culture was fundamentally conservative. Americans, by contrast, fetishize innovation. Roman technology never escaped the Iron Age. America is blazing the way into an age of unprecedented technological progress. Speaking of unprecedented technological progress, today needs to make and I can rep for the narrative videos topic. The Roman Empire, in short, was nothing like modern America. But that isn't really the argument that commentators are making when they say that America is falling like Rome. The underlying assumption is not that America is specific.
Oh, that's funny. Alaric I enters Rome after siege. Visigoth king to repurpose the Temple of Vesta as a bass guitar museum. The RNN, the Rome News Network.
Specifically like Rome, it's that all empires, ancient and modern, follow a similar course from greatness to grave. The fall of Rome is just a familiar illustration of a universal rule.
Yeah.
There is some validity in the idea that, allowing for the variables of technology and culture, Large states tend to behave in similar ways across time. Leading powers, for example, have historically been prone to complacency about their place in the world. Such parallels, however, obscure as much as they reveal. History isn't that simple. There was certainly nothing simple about the fall of Rome. Rome fell because Germanic tribes overcame its frontier defenses. It fell because a series of ruinous civil wars sapped its strength. It fell because its economy was underdeveloped. It fell because it had lost the loyalty of provincial elites. It fell because its officials were corrupt. It fell for all of these reasons, and for 100 others. I used to tell my students that the only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. It would be more accurate.
That's an interesting description in terms of, but I'm not sure. I think that's rooted in, it's a rooted thing to say, because I think most people don't learn from history because they don't even attempt to learn history and understand history and reciprocate meaning of history.
To say that what we learn from history is what we learn by traveling, that apparent differences can conceal profound similarities, and vice versa.
Good one.
As in a foreign country, we'll
Good
always
painting.
tend to see what we expect to see. All we can do is open ourselves to being surprised. In this sense, thinking about the fall of Rome can help us think more clearly about America, not because America and Rome are similar, but because they're so different, and because we have to think hard about those differences. That the decline of Rome has no precise parallels in the 21st century does not mean that it has no lessons to offer modern America. It just means that those lessons aren't obvious. My new book.
Try not to sneeze once again. I hate allergies, bro. Yeah, they're very different places. America and Rome. It's very difficult to I mean, it's the closest thing to a Rome, United States. So that's where I think the discussion starts. Where it breaks down is where you see all the differences. You see a unified constitution of territory. You're not you have unfathomable technology prevent simple things from happening, like warlords to start rising in certain states or provinces of Canada and then invading, or Mexico and invading. Like, the simple stuff is not going to happen. You're not going to have invasions, and then you'll have your petty conversations of there's an invasion on the southern border. Not really. Not really. There's migrants flooding in because of uh, disrupted countries based off of continued escalations and uh, volatile situations in third world countries. Not the first. It's not a barbarian invasion the likes of Rome, second and third century, or the fourth century even. It's not that. It's not that. In terms of, like, the only thing where it becomes an interesting conversation when it comes to the hegemony factor of the United States kind of being like the biggest hegemonic power of our time, where we have military bases throughout the United States, throughout the world, more importantly throughout the world, that allows our sphere of influence militarily as a deterrent amongst rivals such as China, Russia, XYZ, Iran. But the I think the biggest similarity and parallel we can derive from, though, is within our self, within America of itself, is where we see the biggest threat, whether it be turbulent politics or continuous divide to, and I think it's more of an economical thing in anything conquest or military that we can look at. It's an economic factor. I mean, we're $37 trillion in debt right now. That's never going to get paid. It's going to lead to something unforeseen. That's the only thing I can derive a parallel, is there might be economic turmoil. Nothing of the fact, and maybe some that might threaten the hegemonic rulings of the world. But we'll have to see how this movie plays out. Thank you guys for watching. Always fun to listen and watch a Toldinstone video. So stoic, so great. Till next time, peace out. Bye bye.